Hi, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Sarah.
Well, thanks for joining me to talk to my class a little bit about our disability module. Um, let's go ahead so you and I have known each other for about 15 years, I think. Met through my sister, and Dan currently lives in the DC area, so he wasn't able to come into class in person, but he's agreed to share his wisdom with us remotely. So thanks for being here, Dan.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Uh, yeah, we did. We met when your brother-in-law and I were in law school. I think you came to visit your sister. Uh, and I was in a wheelchair back then. I think all your students can probably see I'm in a little bit of a wheelchair here. They might be able to see that in their video. Um, but yeah, so uh, gosh, a little bit about me. After law school, I moved up to the Washington, D.C. area. I've been working at the Securities and Exchange Commission as a lawyer for the last 14 years or so. Um, and, you know, you might not be able to tell this, but I am a quadriplegic. My shoulders can move, but I cannot control my hands at all. You already know that, Sarah, but your students don't. Um, I mean, I guess you want me to show them how I do some of the stuff around my room, I suppose.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, usually I interact with my computer with a Dragon dictation software. The name of the software is Dragon, but it's kind of commercial off the shelf stuff. But I also use this stick here. It really is just a stick, and I can tap on my phone. That is really primarily how I interact with the world. I use uh, Amazon Echoes or Google Home devices around the house to kind of turn off lights and things like that. The I have an automatic door opener on my house. I get around taking taxis everywhere to town. But I mean, that's kind of my life in a nutshell. Um, I have medical aides who help get me up, get me to bed at night. So that's kind of the basics of my day to day life.
All right, thanks. Can you just tell us a little bit more about you, like your hobbies and where you're from?
So I grew up in Colorado, um, and of course, being a boy from the mountains, I loved snowboarding and camping, skiing, mountain biking, things like that. And then when I was 24, I was in I was in Alpine, Utah actually, dove into a pool, broke my neck. It was a C3, C4 spinal cord injury, so that's vertebrae right up here in your neck, right up at the top. And I was paralyzed right away. So that's how I got into this situation.
Did you go to BYU?
Yes, I did. Well,
Okay,
I did the
BYU alum.
accounting program, got a bachelor's and master's in accounting. And
I think some of my students are in accounting in the
it's a
class.
it's a good major.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So I am actually going to bring this back to a conversation we were just having before we started the recording. We were talking a little bit about media and how people with disabilities are portrayed in the media the other day, and you were telling me you watched Me Before You today. So I was just wondering if you could tell my students what you were telling me about media and people with disabilities.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know who said it. Maybe it was Shakespeare or something, or some smart person basically divided all stories into two categories: comedies and tragedies. This isn't an idea I made up, and um, it's kind of a simplistic way of viewing the world. But the story of somebody with a spinal cord injury, a quadriplegic, in the media is portrayed as a tragedy almost always. And what that means is the saddest possible ending is the ending we get. And so often in movies, you know, in Me Before You, uh, similar movies, A Million Dollar Baby, If you ever seen that, it's a Clint Eastwood one that I think it won Best Picture Oscar maybe 20 years ago or so. Uh, Similarly tragic ending. I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody, but uh, when you see a quadriplegic in a typical Hollywood movie, it ends one way. That person commits suicide, and it's uh, it's it's an unrealistic portrayal of the reality of having a significant disability. Um, it's simple, it's it's simplistic. It's overly dramatic. Of course, having a spinal cord injury isn't easy. Having any difficult life experience isn't easy, but our lives aren't as simple as they are sometimes portrayed in the movies. We don't have to be just because you have a disability doesn't mean your life is a tragedy. You you still get to choose what the meaning of your life is. Um, any of these movies, if they took 10 minutes out of the movie, if they took the sad part out of the movie, all of a sudden it's a comedy. You could totally flip the narrative of a movie just by changing the ending. Um, and in life, I mean that's what life is. You can't change what has happened, but you can turn a tragedy into a comedy just by the choices you make, or even not even the choices you make, not the actions you take, but just how you choose to think about your experiences.
Mhm. How have your views shifted or developed? Because you were saying a little bit, the views you have now weren't the views you had before. And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, well, when I first broke my neck, so I dove into a pool in Alpine, Utah, and I it was a little too shallow. I was a little too tall, and I knew right off the bat that something was wrong. At first, I thought I just had passed out or knocked myself out, but pretty quickly I was like, oh, I'm paralyzed. But I didn't fully understand the implications of that. I thought, oh, I'll just give me a little bit of time and I'll recover. Or I remember actually being in the hospital and, my arms and legs couldn't move. But I remember thinking, oh, maybe I could do like kayaking because then I could use my arms even though my legs don't work. But clearly all four of my limbs didn't work. So that was kind of illogical. So a lot of the mental states I went through during those first 6 months of my life after injury, they were a little bit disconnected from reality. But I think that was a little bit helpful. It wouldn't have been helpful to correct me at that time and be like, well, actually, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. And it's really important that you understand that right now. It wasn't important to tell me that at that time. It was okay to let me kind of live in whatever dream or delusion was going on in my mind at that time until I was healthy enough and in a place where I was preparing to take those next steps. And then at that point, it was necessary to confront me with my reality. So maybe 3 months after injury, the doctors sent me down in a room, probably like an intervention if, uh, when somebody's an alcoholic and you sit down with your family, they tell you have a problem. They sent me down in a conference room with all my doctors and therapists, and they asked me what I wanted to do. And I initially responded, well, I wanna walk. I had one of my therapists, he had a cord injury when he was a kid, and he walked. So I said, "I wanna walk like John," because he walked. And my doctor said, "That's, um, that's not a realistic possibility. You're gonna be paralyzed for the rest of your life." And that was probably the first time I really, like, cried after my injury. I mean, there were times when I was suffering and in pain, but it was the first time I, like, cried for myself. And, uh, it just took me a minute, and then I decided, "Well, I'm gonna go back to school and get my degree." So I was 24 years old. I was at BYU, so I went back to BYU, got a bachelor's and master's, um, and then went to law school after that. So
Mhm.
it's not so much that my life philosophy changed too terribly much, but my awareness of my situation significantly changed.
Mhm. What are some of the fun things you like to do now? I think at some point you showed me a painting that you did or something. I'm trying to
Ah,
remember. Or like something you
uh,
invented. I'm trying to remember what it was.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I do kind of paint for fun every once in a while. Once in a while,
Mhm.
I usually get some friends to come over and, obviously I don't have very good hand-eye coordination. So my style of painting is just more abstract, throwing stuff on a canvas and running over it with my wheelchair or kicking it around. But necessity is the mother of invention, right? And you might be able to see, I'm not sure if people can see this because my shirt's kind of dark, but I have this tube here that's connected to my chest. And I kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say I invented the underlying technology because I didn't. But what I did do is I created the straps and apparatus here so it functioned the way I wanted. When I first got to BYU, when I first got out of the hospital, kind of the standard setup here. Oh, and in case people don't know, I drive this chair with this tube right here. So if I blow in it, it moves me around. If I blow hard, it accelerates. If I suck hard, decelerates. If I blow softly, it goes to the left. While I suck softly, it goes to the blow is to the right, suck is to the left. But they used to use kind of like a metal, these interlocking or plastic. I guess they're kind of like Legos almost, but just these tubing that would come over my shoulder and position the tube in front of me. I was really afraid. I even had some experiences at BYU when somebody walked past and their backpack hit the tube and it knocked it farther away than I could reach, and I just ran into a wall. And
Oh wow.
fortunately, I'm going walking speed, so that wasn't that big of a deal. But when I came up to DC, I was riding the metro, and I thought to myself, you know, that's a that's a 4-foot drop from the metro platform onto the electrified rails. I do not want to fall off this sidewalk here and get electrocuted. I got to
Mhm.
find a solution that's going to make this really strong, really robust. So if somebody's arm slaps me in the face randomly or something, this tube isn't going to get knocked away. So out of necessity, I've created a couple devices that enabled me to use my equipment more
Mhm.
safely. And then, of course, I have things that hold this stick here that I've kind of created. I got some tube clamps and some devices that um, kind of hold everything in a place where I can reach it.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think I hadn't heard those stories before. That would be super scary.
Ah,
To wonder if you wouldn't, you're on a platform. Ooh, that sounds really scary. Um, let's see. What is important to you in terms of family and or healthcare provider support and or interactions with you?
um, I mean that's a good question. Um, I think for most people with a disability as significant as mine, I mean, this is usually a disability where you need somebody to help you with all activities of daily living. So I can't get up in the morning by myself. I need people to help me bathe, get dressed, go to the bathroom, eat, et cetera, clean my house. And I think most people in this situation, they're going to be on Medicaid for their entire life. Well, their entire disabled life, because there really is no alternative to taking care of that expense other than just paying it out of pocket. So that's an option. You can, become independently wealthy or get a really high paying job that you can cover that expense, or you can be on Medicaid. And jobs that, these types of expenses, if you look at averages, um, like the statistics are going to be like, $80,000 a year, $90,000, $100,000. Kind of depends on the severity of the disability, but that's the kind of out of pocket expense you would be facing if you didn't have Medicaid or insurance. Insurance pays a chunk of my medical expenses, but no health insurance, including Medicare, pays for long-term care. And long-term care is defined as that's like nursing assistants who come in and help you bathe and get dressed. That is not covered by health insurance or Medicare. It's only covered by Medicaid, which is basically government sponsored healthcare for people with low income. So most quadriplegics or people with significant disabilities that need that long-term care to live, they're going to be on Medicaid. It's impractical for your average person um, to get a job just with a starting salary of 80, 90, $100,000. So it really is an impossible situation for that person to even attempt to get off of Medicaid. Their only options are to get very low paying jobs that won't compromise their eligibility for Medicaid. Um, as a result, um, we can all imagine the difficulty of working with a government program is oftentimes you can't dictate um, what it is you need, and you don't always get what you think you might need. And so oftentimes you would have family helping, whether that's siblings, parents, whatever, helping you get up or take care of your house or shopping, things like that. Um, and if you're on Medicaid, that's kind of your only option. Unless there is a government program that can help you, you are oftentimes dependent on family or friends to fill in. Um, I'm really fortunate. I have a good job. I have a great paying job, and I'm able to pay for those expenses on my own. And so I'm not dependent on family for anything that I don't want to be dependent on. So I joined my family for weekly dinners, and uh, you know, it'd be weird, I think, to invite one of my aides to join me for dinner and feed me there with my family watching. So I just have my dad or my sister or whoever kind of feed me. It becomes more of a social thing. But in terms of my medical care, um, I personally try to avoid having my family and friends help with that. Um, they have important things they need to do, and I think that'd be kind of inconvenient for them. So that's kind of the situation I'm in.
Okay. I feel like a couple times ago you were telling me about a change in a state law. Am I remembering
Yes.
right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that. So, um, in every state except for Maryland, um, to qualify for Medicaid, there are usually a couple of different paths to qualify for Medicaid, but all of them, there are income and asset limits. And for most places, the general rule is you have to have less than $2,000 of monthly income and less than $2,000 of assets. So if you have $2,000, $2,001 in your bank account, you do not qualify for Medicaid. And if you make $2,001 per month, you don't qualify for Medicaid. So that can create and there are some exceptions and some workarounds, but in general, you have a situation where if you have a disability and you want to get on Medicaid, you have to deliberately limit your income or quit your job or stop working just so you can get that healthcare. That's kind of an undesirable situation. I mean, if somebody can work, we would want them to. I mean, there's you can get a lot of fulfillment from work, and I have some friends in similar situations as myself who lived in Maryland, and they were deliberately limiting their income so they could maintain Medicaid eligibility. And one of them, um, actually, he uh, met a gal, met a woman, and they wanted to get married. But there's also a rule that if you get married, they count your spouse's income and assets as well. And so they started a family without getting married, even though they wanted to get married, and referred to each other as, husband or wife, because if they got married, he would lose his Medicaid, and together they didn't make enough money to cover those medical expenses. So basically, he went to the Maryland state legislature and said, "Hey, we should change this law." So the state of Maryland eliminated their asset and income uh, limits for Medicaid eligibility for targeted disabilities. So not for everybody. So it's not like everybody's getting on Medicaid in Maryland. That's not the case. It's certain um, significant disabilities. Those individuals, they have eliminated the income limitations so that those individuals can remain eligible for Medicaid. Now, it's not just a free ride. They require them to pay a monthly premium, just like you would for insurance. And I believe it's something like it might be like I think it's like 7.5% of your income above a certain amount. That's your so if you made $100,000, it maybe the limit's $50,000. So like everything over $50,000 gets subject to this premium. So maybe if you make $150,000, you would then pay $7,500 annually for your Medicaid premium. And I probably have the numbers wrong, but it's something like that.
Oh, interesting. Well, thanks for your time. I'm wondering, is there anything else that you think would be useful for the students to know or that you want to tell them?
Um, well, I mean, I think anybody with a disability would say this, but every disability is unique. Uh, even to even to disabilities that are, the doctor would diagnose those as the exact same issue. Um, there can be subtle physical differences that change how that disability affects that person's life. But um, beyond that, there's always the mental component, the mental, emotional, spiritual component of that, and that kind of philosophy, that way of thinking, can dramatically change the disability experience for that individual. So
Mhm.
just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I did change my mind. Is there anything you want to say about like built environment or access issues?
Oh, access issues. Um, well, Uh, I'm first of all, I'm pro accessibility. Like, uh, it's great if there's a ramp and I can get into a building. A step just slows me down. But as a general matter, sometimes people think, oh, these accessibility requirements, um, these are just additional requirements that make my life difficult and make it hard for me to build this building or make this sidewalk. But it doesn't all you have to do is cross a sidewalk a few times at the crosswalk, and you see a little curb cut out, seemingly for a wheelchair. But if you just sit there and watch who uses that curb cutout, almost every single person that crosses in that area uses the curb cutout. And it's not because they're in wheelchairs or advocating for people with wheelchairs. People are kind of just naturally a little bit lazy. They're going to take the easy path, and Uh, Also, when you see a UPS delivery driver uh, hauling in a package on a little wheeled dolly, he uses the curb cutout. If you see, a grandmother pushing her grandbaby across the sidewalk, she's going to use the curb cutout. Um, a lot of these accessibility features, at first, they're novel, they're unique. It's a change, and it seems like change has costs, but eventually they become part of the expected built environment, and everybody just uses them. In a noisy restaurant where people are watching a sports game, when we were kids, uh, the channel was just blaring, and there was no closed caption. Now that TV's on mute, and there's closed captioning, not because there are a bunch of um, people with hearing impairment at every single restaurant. It's because when people are in a restaurant, they want to be able to talk with the people around them, so they want that TV to be turned down. So, accessibility really isn't just about people with disabilities. It's about making an environment that's actually better for everybody, even without disabilities.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with the class today and hope you have a good rest of your President's Day.
You're most welcome.
What's that?
You're most welcome.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Yeah.